Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and non-binary people alike. Welcome to the Derek O'Shea Show. Witness Tucker Carlson's interview where he ignites the truth with Vivek Ramaswamy Mimi. Unveiling insights, battling deceit, this dynamic duo challenges the norms. Unyielding honesty prevails. Join our crusade for unfiltered discourse. Together, we shall herald in a new era of enlightenment! Welcome to the revolution. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Derek O'Shea Show. Hope you guys are having a freaking fantastic day. I'm pulling up my chat. Boop-a-doop-a-doop. Pulling up my chat. Doop-a-doop-a-doop. Willie, what's going on? How we feeling today? How are we feeling? How's everyone doing? Drop a like if you're watching on the YouTubes. Drop a thumbs up if you're watching on the Rumbles. I hope everyone's having a fantastic day. I've had a hell of a day at work, and so I came home and I was like, what am I going to do? I'm going to watch this one. I'm going to watch Vivek and Tucker Carlson because I genuinely believe that Vivek is the number 2 candidate and potential to become number 1 eventually. I mean, he's not perfect, and there are things that you can point out that you don't like about him, but there's so many things that is just bright for the future. All good in rural Arizona. Good to hear. Good to hear, my friend. Let's just get right into it because I am genuinely interested in this interview, and I couldn't help it. I looked around at the news that was going on, and I was like, we're gonna watch this. That'd be stupid not to. So let's watch it together. Feel free to give your comments. I'm curious what your thoughts are on Vivek, and please let me know. Yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on Vivek.
The government absolutely lied to us. The 9/11 Commission lied. The FBI lied. There's a federal case of victims on 9/11 that want accountability. I don't think they would have come for me if this was false. What do we know about Hunter Biden's dealings? What do we know about the truth of what happened on January 6th? What do we know about that Nashville shooter manifesto? Yes, we can handle the truth. Just give me the hard truth.
It feels like we're on the cusp of chaos.
Oh, there's something going on. I mean, I think we're like in a 1776 moment in this country. We are driving Russia further into
I agree,
China's
Willie.
arms as we arm Ukraine, further strengthening what I see as the single greatest military threat. We are dependent on a tiny island nation off the southeast coast of China.
I'm going to hit
for
with
our entire
copyright.
modern way of life. I will not send our sons and daughters to die over somebody else's nationalistic dispute. End the Ukraine war, reduce our economic dependence on China, weaken the Russia-China alliance.
I'm not sure what is controversial about any of that. They're a dumber group than the foreign policy Republicans. Where are we now?
There's a deeper void and vacuum that we have to fill with an affirmative alternative vision of our own. And that takes courage.
The first Republican debate of the season is less than a week away. It's next Wednesday in Milwaukee. We have no idea what's going to happen there, of course. But one prediction we can confidently make is that a man called Vivek Ramaswamy is likely to make an impression, a political outsider with a complicated name who is unaccountably rising in the polls. Who is this guy? Is he a BS artist? Is he for real? We just sat down with him for an hour.
BS artist.
We found him one of the best versed voices in policy we've talked to in a long time. That was a surprise. This is a conversation worth watching. Here it is. Vivek, thanks for joining us.
It's good to be here.
So you, the other day, made a comment about 9/11 in which you suggested that the U.S. government had not been wholly forthcoming about what happened that day, that there had been lying by the federal bureaucracies. That seems obviously true. The response was unbelievable. It was immediate. You were attacked as a conspiracy monger, as a lunatic, but not just by the left, also by the goons at the Wall Street Journal editorial page, wrote a whole piece about how you disqualified yourself by even asking that question. What were you saying, and why was the reaction?
Oh, I agree with that comment, Willie.
It was fascinating, Tucker. I've had many of these moments in the campaign where they said, this is the campaign ender. This is over. He just blew it. This is one of them. So this is like the fourth or fifth of those. But what was interesting about it was, right, this was not a left-wing chorus, right? This was mostly actually a right-leaning chorus. And Mike Pence, and he was deeply disappointed. Chris Murphy, this Democratic senator guy, says something very similar to Mike Pence. And so it's fascinating. It says there's something going on here. So in fairness, Tucker, I didn't suggest it. I explicitly said that the government absolutely lied to us. The 9/11 Commission lied. The FBI lied. Now, is this a core point of my campaign? No, it's not. I actually went on a comedy show where some guy asked me, was the moon landing fake? I said, I think it was real. Then he asked me, did the government tell us the truth about 9/11? I said, no, they did not. So in response to a question, I'm going to answer honestly.
Yeah.
And the thing I had in mind was the facts. There's this guy, al-Bayoumi. Now, rewind back to 9/11 and the pre-9/11 day. Think of how ludicrous this story is. A 42-year-old graduate student, and there's nothing wrong with being 42 and going back to school.
Too many
My
syllables.
dad went back to school much later in life, but he's a 42-year-old graduate student who receives the two of the terrorists who flew planes into buildings in the United States of America not that long later, receives them at the airport in LA, takes them to his house, spends lots of time with them, integrates them into the community. But the account for what he said happened was he met them randomly at the airport. That doesn't make much sense on the face.
Just kind of happened to be at LAX and
no, exactly.
Two guys
and
from
hey,
Saudi.
you know, you look like guys we might get along with, and then suddenly become fast friends at the airport, so much so that he takes them up. So it's a little suspicious. But hey, the 9/11 Commission and the FBI looked into it, and at the time they said his account is accurate.
Yeah, it sounds legit.
It sounds super legit, right? Now, there was some
Hanging out at LAX.
You know, these guys came from Saudi Arabia. Does this guy who received them have any ties to Saudi Arabia? That's where they landed. But now, 20 years later, in 2021 and 2022, the FBI quietly declassifies documents. And they have to, 20 years later is the deadline. That suggests that, oh, wait a minute. They did know, actually, that this guy was a Saudi intelligence operative. Interesting how that works. Just slips that right under there 20 years later. Now, there are real consequences for this right now because there's a federal case of families of victims on 9/11 that want accountability, that are determining answers. So they're suing the Saudi government. And the case turns on whether or not this is true. Because you know those attackers were from Saudi Arabia. The Bush administration, you'd have the 9/11 Commission, bipartisan. You have the fact of the FBI, CIA, everybody saying that, no, this guy was really just acting independently here. But now we say is a Saudi intelligence operative. There's really the question of whether the Saudi Arabia owes damages to these families. So this is a relevant question. So is this the main point I'm focused on in my campaign? No, I'm not. We have to focus on the future of the country. But if I'm asked a question and I answer honestly based
Starting to feel
on
like
facts,
it was.
I don't think they would have come for me if this was false, if this was ludicrous.
Of course.
Lying
is never punished.
Lying is never punished. But it's speaking the truths you're not supposed to speak. That's what actually attracts the immune response, the anaphylaxis.
But why? I mean, you made I thought, a really wonderful point in one of your responses to this, in which you said it's not okay for the government to lie to us, period, in a democracy. It's poison, and it corrodes the system that we revere, democracy. So, but why would the Wall Street Journal take time out of its busy schedule of defending low capital gains taxes to attack you over this?
You know, what's interesting is I think that there's a bipartisan consensus in this country right now that we, the people, we can't handle the truth. It's like Jack Nicholson at the end of
I've
the
heard
movie.
him say this
right?
like 100 times.
You can't handle the
It's
truth.
good,
You need me on that wall.
It's a little
My basic view in this campaign is no, we don't need you on that wall. And yes, we can handle the truth. COVID-19, what was the origin? What did we know about the vaccines before we mandated them? What did we know about Hunter Biden's dealings before we systematically suppressed that story? What do we know about the truth of what happened on January 6th? What do we know about that Nashville shooter manifesto, the transgender individual who shot up a bunch of people in a Christian school? That's why I went to Nashville not that long ago, because Bill Lee, a Republican governor of Tennessee, now wants to pass a red flag law in Tennessee without releasing that manifesto. The whole point is the public can't handle the truth. And so I had offline discussions. I mean, we're talking with, big donors in the Republican Party, big folks in media, executives and otherwise, who said, hey, listen, okay, even if what you're saying is true, this is not helping you. You say, why is that the first question that should go through my mind, right? I mean, personally, I think the way I'm running this campaign is I'm not thinking about what's helping me or not before I say it. So far, at least that approach does seem to be helping me.
Yes.
We're doing all right. But even if I weren't, I'd rather lose some election than to play some political snakes and ladders of what we're supposed to say. And I think that's really one of the questions at issue today, as it was in 1776. Do we believe that the public can be trusted with the truth? Whatever the truth is, just give me the hard truth. I mean, I have a friend of mine, her father died recently. She talked about actually her experience of her father having
Michelle
heart tattoo when she
Obama,
was a
real
kid.
name Mike.
He went on to live.
That's what
as
I want
far
to
as
know.
he did. But she said the one thing she just wanted from the doctors, from her dad, et cetera, is, you know, she's 12 years old at the time. I can handle the truth. Just tell me. Like, is my dad going to die?
Shoot
Is my
some
dad
letters.
likely to die
Yes.
before he goes in for the next procedure? Don't just tell me he's going to live because you think that's what I need to hear. Just tell me the truth and I can handle the truth. I think most of us are this way. I think we as free human beings,
I like Tucker when
badly,
he listens.
what
He goes
makes
like
us
this.
human beings and not animals is the belief that we can believe in something bigger than ourselves and that we can handle the truth from those who are in power. And I think that's the moment we live in today. It was the moment of the American Revolution, that we the people can be trusted. And I think we now live in a moment where the government, and not just the government, but a broader establishment in our country, believes that citizens of this nation cannot be trusted
You
with the
can't
truth.
handle
So when
the
you
truth
describe the way
social.
that people who run the country feel about voters, you're describing the way parents treat small children.
That's right. That's right. I think that that's actually worth understanding, because there's one school
It
of
reminds
thought
me
that
of a
says the
Republican
government,
Obama.
the people in
Where we
charge,
gotta
are
speak in.
fundamentally hostile
Kind of see that.
to the people. If only it were so easy.
Wow.
actually.
He talks a little bit faster.
I think the reality of what's going on is
he probably won't do
far more
cars and
dangerous.
coffee with
Where
comedians.
the people who are in charge have actually what they think of as a benevolent view of the people. That we're doing what's actually right for you, for me, for the populace at large.
Company.
And then if you look at this throughout history, Tucker, for most of human history, that's how it's been done. For most of human history, before 1776 in the old world, the vision was the people cannot be trusted to sort out their own differences. One person, one vote? That's such a laughable idea. It has to be church leaders and labor leaders and business leaders
He is a
that
smooth
decide in the
talker.
back of palace halls
Clean
what's
and
right for the
articulate.
rest of society at
Certainly
large.
feels that way.
And then we had this weird departure in 1776 that said, no. Actually, we the people can be trusted in a system where every person's voice and vote counts equally, with free speech and open debate in the public square, whatever it is. Sometimes we might get it wrong. Sometimes we get it right. But whatever it is, that's the way we do things in this new thing we call the United States of America. But then every once in a while, and we're in one of those moments, that ugly monster rears its head again that says, no. The people can't be trusted. It has to be now in the back of palace halls, in the back of three-letter government agencies in Washington, D.C., or in the back of BlackRock's corner office on Park Avenue in Manhattan, wherever it is. It's that the enlightened have to make sure that the public is protected from the truth, just like a parent protects a child. And I think it's that parental instinct. It's not the kidnapper's instinct, right? It's not the guy.
I like the whole, truth spiel he does, and I agree with it, where it's like, you can't handle the truth, and to some degree we can't, but I'm a very good listener, and when I start to hear the same shtick, it just comes off as so disingenuous to me. It just seems so fake. And I'm starting to hear his repetitiveness for answers. And I don't like that. I still like a lot of the stuff he stands for, and like his whole thing where he's like suing companies and against ESG and stuff like that. And there are things I don't like, but there are things about every Republican candidate I just don't like. You're not going to have a perfect candidate. That's like this idea that you're going to have this perfect candidate is such a lie. And there's always something that you're not going to like. But like, it's just too much. I mean, you got to be the first mainstream African-American who is articulate and bright, clean, nice looking guy. I mean, the storybook, Joe Biden. Yeah. What if Joe Biden debates him and goes, he's actually a pretty articulate Indian guy. Huge fan of it. Aren't all elected officials too good to be true? Yes. We're in the election season, so they are going to tell us what we want to hear. That is what their job is. That is their entirety of their job. And so when a candidate starts talking to their base, just know they are being told usually that is going to bring about you to get them to vote them in. That might be just because he's doing all the rounds, ask the same questions. Yeah, it certainly seems like the same questions. It's hard to tell. I still like it. But there is not a perfect candidate in my eyes. I don't like his business ethics. What part?
Guy who wants to, kidnap and kill the child. No, it's actually almost what they think of as being the instinct of a parent who's doing for you what's better for you than you know for yourself. And I think that's what gives it actual staying power, because it's not what somebody thinks of as evil who's committing evil. They think of it as actually a moral obligation to the public, which explains the bipartisan nature of when somebody speaks the truth about what really happened on 9/11. No, hush, keep that under the rug. Because Republican or Democrat, we know
selling mostly
that the people can't be trusted for that. It's not good for the people.
The children are listening. Lower your voice.
The kids are listening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you get the
listening,
sense
Dad.
as you travel the country, talk to people, speak, that we're on it feels like we're on the cusp of chaos?
I think we're on the cusp of something. I'd like to think of it as a
Do you not remember the Summer of Love?
revolution, in a positive sense of that word. I think that, I try to be an optimist at times.
Do you feel like this is...
Oh, there's something going on. I think we're like in a 1775, spring of 1776 moment in this country, actually. I think that people are hungry. Now, the form I want to see it play out in is reviving those shared ideals that unite us, that set the nation into motion in 1776, that I think are innate to our nature as human beings, as Americans. I think that there's a hunger for a revival of those ideals. That's where we are, but there's a lot of ways that energy could go. The way I would like to play my small role in helping channel that energy, it's not all going to be done by the U.S. president, but there's a role to play, is to channel that energy towards a positive revival of that which unites us across our diverse attributes or divides. But if it doesn't go that way, there's a dam that's going to break.
Yeah, Wilson, I like to believe that Tucker is not trying to answer questions he has pre-planned. That... At least from the last, when he had all the other presidential candidates on stage with him, it certainly didn't seem like they knew what he was going to say. You saw a lot of posturing at that moment. What if people refuse to pay their taxes this spring? Then we will have a 17th.
River's going to go somewhere. I hope it
got to have a Boston Tea Party
revival
moment
rather than, other places where this could go.
How concerned are you about a real economic reset in the next year?
Quite concerned. I think that 2024 is going to be a year where it's not going to take a lot of guts for me to make this prediction, because I'll tell you why it's easy to make. We're on the cusp of a major economic downturn next year. We live under conditions of a deeply inverted yield curve. These are topics that may put people to sleep, and so we don't have to
Can you explain
get into it. Yeah, it's basically you would expect in the long run, right? Long run interest rates on long run bonds are higher compared to interest rates on short run bonds, because there would be higher risk of being repaid back. That's how things are supposed to work. There are a wide range of factors that can occasionally cause that to tilt in the other direction. We're in one of those conditions right now, where the interest rates on short-term bonds are significantly higher than they are on long-run bonds. And every time that's happened in the last 40 years, that has predicted a recession that followed in the year or so that came later. And there's lots of complicated reasons for why, and economists can debate it. But what's not debatable is that that's exactly what happens. That's where we are now, which is why we're, I think, in the calm before the storm. Biden will put up low unemployment numbers. Well, that misses the point that we have a deeper structural deficiency, where our real problem is there are twice as many jobs open as there are people looking for work.
Right.
That's the actual deeper structural failure as it relates to the labor market.
People have stopped looking for work.
People have stopped looking for work, absolutely. People are being paid more, or have been habituated more, to staying at home than to go to work. People also don't have the skill sets required to actually show up to work, because they have four-year college degrees that were subsidized by the U.S. Department of Education,
church pastors,
without actually having the skill sets that many employers badly need in order to grow their business, whether it's a big business or a small one. The inflation numbers, they'll point to saying, hey, the rate of inflation's coming down. Inflation's cumulative. things are still 16, 20% more expensive than they were in 2020, and wages have not gone up in the same way over the same period. And so there are deep structural issues with our economy. I mean, the national debt, interest payments are going to be the biggest portion and line item of the federal budget very soon. But I think that short-term numbers that we look at right now belie the reality.
When are you going to talk about Dylan Mulvaney? They all seem like megachurch pastors. I can kind of agree with that. It's what they're all doing their book tours, except for Biden. Biden's Catholic.
That we're going to have a reckoning. I think that reckoning is
backed by
likely
the church.
The timing of these things is hard to predict, but I think that likely reckoning 2024 could be a pretty good prediction for when that's coming.
But that's not just an economic story. I mean, people have psychologically, I think, a very hard time moving backward.
Yes.
Right? It's one thing to be poor. It's another thing to be poor having been rich.
Yes.
Very hard for people to metabolize that.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that happens to hundreds of millions of people at the same time, people get radical.
Especially against the backdrop of already having deep distrust.
Right.
In my opinion, appropriately deep distrust in our existing institutions, including the government in this country. And so I think there are two ways this could break. Right? Sometimes you go through hardship and you're strengthened by that hardship. I'm just thinking about it as an individual in my life. Like, I've gone through a hardship in my life. My father's been through hardship. In each of those cases, that led us to become stronger for having gone through that and did things that we otherwise would have never done, created things in the world that otherwise would have never existed. And that's the positive version of this. And it's the version I want to see for our country.
Deep distress.
But there's a very different way this could break too. I think that if we don't channel that frustration in a direction that creates something anew, right? A sort of reincarnation of our American experiment, which is what's going to be required, then I think this ends the way that many other revolutions do, is not the creative kind, but the destructive kind. And I think the economic collapse calamity that I think recession at least that's coming could just be the catalyst.
Are you guys noticing like more and more economists are finally predicting that recession is coming as if we're not already in one?
We'll blame it on, that'll be the final match that's lit, but it's the kerosene on the floor that we have to pay attention to in the meantime. And that's why I think when people ask me, are you a culture issues guy, or are you an
gas
economy
station
guy,
sushi more than the
or are you
federal
focused on
government?
foreign policy? It's missing the point. These things are each symptoms of a deeper
They're
place.
of a piece. There's no doubt.
No doubt about it.
So you said something when I saw you in Iowa earlier this summer. You said something really, really interesting about donors. And you are an interesting figure because you're effectively from the donor class. You're a rich guy running for president. Now you're dealing with donors from the other side. Mm-hmm. And you said that your views on Ukraine had given a lot of them pause.
Yes. There's no doubt that I have lost otherwise willing and interested donors or potential mega donors to my campaign over my position on Ukraine, which is fascinating because I don't think there's any particular self-interest at issue. It's not like somebody saying, oh, well, I own, a big chunk of Raytheon or something like that, and I'm going to have my interests harmed. Therefore, I'm not going to back you because that will harm my self-interest. That'd be an easy and fun and facile explanation, but that's not what's going on. I think there is a deeper bipartisan institutional consensus, the same consensus that said we can't be told the truth about 9/11, that effectively says that we can't confront some of the same facts about Ukraine. And I try not to be reactive, Tucker, because it is a natural impulse where, at least the way I'm wired is, if somebody tells you not to do something, there's almost a natural temptation to go in that direction.
Right.
So I would like to think, and I believe my position here is grounded in fact and not that reactive emotion, but it's interesting that it makes me doubly committed to making sure
Netherlands just entered recession. That's true. I don't trust Thai guys.
that I'm really speaking the truth about what's going on here, at least because it means that the rest of the field absolutely is not. Right. I mean, the rest of
that's kind of
the entire Republican field, not one of them. I mean, Donald Trump, we could say he wants to end the war. He hasn't said exactly how. But save for Trump, right? Nobody on the debate stage, certainly for the Republican Party, has a principled position on Ukraine, partly because they understand those are the directions they've been given.
So you think it's interesting because there are a couple of fairly smart, I know them, people running for president right now in the Republican field whose positions on Ukraine are like idiotic.
Or indiscernible.
Right. They don't make sense.
Some are idiotic. The idiotic one is just we have to arm them to the teeth, give them as much money as possible because we stand with Ukraine. The indiscernible ones are the ones where they'll tell you one thing and then they'll tell their donors one thing and then they don't know where they actually stand because they're being buffeted.
But that's the effect of donor pressure. Right.
It is. It really is. It really is. Absolutely. I mean, I think that there's, I think there's finger in wind candidates. And I think that that exists. So there's finger and wind candidates on Ukraine, but I think that there are also separately candidates who just believe that this is the way that we do things in the United States of America. We don't stop until we have taken down what we have decided is our enemy, forgetting that the USSR doesn't exist anymore and believe that that's the only source of victory.
Back in the USSR.
My view, I start from a different premise, and there's pros and cons, right? On one hand, I don't have national ads running because my super PAC the super PAC affiliated with me is tiny compared to those affiliated with, other candidates in this race that have television ads blaring and lifting their numbers up in the polls because they're buying a bunch of TV ads. The flip side is I'm unconstrained by what I'm able to say. And that allows me to speak truth that a lot of people in this country recognize to be the truth, which is that we have no discernible national interest at issue in Ukraine. The truth is that as much as we will fetishize and debate the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, which the U.S. wrote, UK and Russia were also parties to it with Ukraine, which I believe we have more than fulfilled our obligations. You don't hear a peep about James Baker's 1990 commitment, his not 1 inch commitment to the NATO wouldn't expand 1 inch beyond Germany. No discussion of that. Against the backdrop of the reality that we face, which is we are driving Russia further into China's arms.
They already are.
As we arm Ukraine, further strengthening what I see as the single greatest military threat that the United States certainly has faced since World War II. You could make a case that the United States has ever faced if you actually look at where this could be going. And yet we are actually the ones responsible for driving that Russia-China military alliance. And so one of my advantages is that I am not, some people say, well, you don't have foreign policy experience. And I'll say, yes, I don't have foreign policy experience. And that may actually be an advantage in bringing a rational American.
So you're not responsible for the war in Iraq.
Yeah,
and that's a bad thing.
Yeah, well, I think we could debate whether it's a bad thing or not. But if you break the car, you don't turn over the keys to the guy who broke it. That's what I would say. And so, I think that we are on our way to Ukraine turning into another Iraq or another Vietnam all over again.
It does look like Tucker's guest house.
Because there's nuclear weapons at issue. There's an alliance with China, an economy that we depend on for our modern way of life that's also at issue. And the irony is, I think a lot of people today believe that somehow world leaders make their decisions by analogy.
Yes, Angela.
So Xi Jinping is going to say, oh, well, because Vladimir Putin walked away with a piece of Ukraine that he didn't have, that somehow means that by analogy, I'm going to be judged more favorably if I go after Taiwan and walk away with a piece of Taiwan that I didn't have, when I basically don't think that's how autocrats or any global leader should, or at least does, make decisions. To the contrary, I think what's actually more likely to happen is we're going to put Xi Jinping in a more likely position to go after Taiwan sooner because he knows that Russia's in his camp because they're in a more solid alliance.
There's nothing
the United States
about it.
Yeah, on Taiwan, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's mostly right. Now, my view is, this is also another heresy that I think have recently managed to cross last night, which is that I think our commitments to go to war in that situation, or to at least even militarily engage in that situation, should change if it's before or after we have semiconductor independence in this country.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I think so.
So
right?
I agree with you completely, but
wait, what?
For people who aren't following this, explain what you mean.
Yeah. So this is a long history here, but for historical circumstances that are long and unfortunate, we are dependent on a tiny island nation off the southeast coast of China for our entire modern way of life. These lights wouldn't work. The phones in our pockets wouldn't work. These TV screens and cameras wouldn't work if it weren't for leading edge semiconductors that are manufactured by basically one company and a set of companies around them, TSMC on Taiwan.
Do you guys think that? Do you actually think like that? If he actually became president, I don't know if it happened to Trump too. It's like they whisper in your ear the day you walk in, or like, by the way, you have no power, and actually the people with power will absolutely kill you and everyone around you if you Listen to us and do what we say. Bye. He's idealistic. I hope so. We kind of need idealistic. Need a little bit of happiness, joy, some lightheartedness in politics, but at the same time, I don't think it's going to happen.
Power, our entire modern way of life. That's just a hard fact. How we got here, it's a long story. I think it's sad that we are where we are, but we are where we are. China has two reasons to want to go for Taiwan. Okay, one is a nationalistic reason, which is
money. God, semiconductors, money, freedom.
That back in 1949, they had this complicated.
Even my Galaxy
went to Taiwan and claimed that was actually where the real Republic of China was based, and
it's Savage.
Mao Zedong said, no, it's the Communist Party of China out of Beijing. And for the longest time, actually, the U.S. and the UN recognized actually the real China as being run out of Taipei, but at some point along the way switched to saying, no, it's actually run out of Beijing. And so there's this nationalistic thing going on that's super complicated history over there.
These commies.
But there's a more modern motivation for Xi Jinping, which is, wait a minute. If I now have control over that island, I have control over the entire United States, because I now have the economic leverage to get to a deal that the U.S. wouldn't have said yes to. And I think what Xi Jinping is going for is the basic deal where he says, I get to make your stuff as long as I get all of your IP and everything else in return. And right now, if he says that...
Wait, what makes him Andrew Yang? Because he's young and he raps hip-hop songs? Is that why you're calling him Andrew Yang?
The U.S., we're not going to go for that deal. But if he's squatting on the semiconductor supply chain, well, then that's how we ultimately get to parity. Consummate the codependent relationship. And I think that's step one of a broader conquest of the modern West.
How hard would it be to achieve, as you said, semiconductor independence in the United States?
It's not going to be easy, but I'm confident that with focus, I can lead us there by the end of my first term in office. And my basic rule of thumb on this one, Tucker, is just to be very practical, looking at this from American interests.
Say it, baby.
I do not consent to Xi Jinping holding an economic gun to our head and lording that over for the next 100 years of the future of the United States. But if we're no longer dependent on that tiny island nation, then I will not send our sons and daughters to die over somebody else's nationalistic dispute.
How difficult is it to produce? I mean, it's interesting, and you said there's a complex history that I'm not familiar with behind it, but how complex is it to build your own semiconductor?
It's complicated because a lot of it relies on know-how. So it's not just...
Yeah, I don't consent. That made me giggle. I don't consent.
Raw production capability, but it's the know-how of how you actually make it. And so I think that requires pulling people from, TSMC in Taiwan to the United States. And I think that that's something that we should be intensely focused on right now. There's new, giant projects, manufacturing projects in Arizona, near where I live, actually in my home state of Ohio, that are going to be steps forward in that direction. I also think that, like it or not, a relationship with South Korea and Japan is going to have to play a role in speeding up our semiconductor self-reliance as well. Samsung is the next best leader. It's not even an American company. After TSMC, there's a...
The problem with Vivek is that he will go up against Trump, and Trump knows about the power of a joke that cuts the tension or boredom that plagues your mind sometimes when you start to get in the weeds of things. And I'm 26 minutes into it. I'm like, give me something that feels real and just like a silly joke just to make me feel like you're a human rather than just, this repetitive things. Whoa, $10 freaking super tech. Derek, can you play Oliver Anthony's hit Richmond, North Virginia reacting comment? Yeah, I can. For sure, dude. Hold on, I want to finish the rest of this. I'm hoping this gets better because right now it's pretty boring. He said a lot of good stuff so far, but also at the same time, I was hoping to feel like a Joe Rogan interview where just you get the human side of people. We all know 30 plus years, we need self-sustaining. It gets worse. Yeah. He could be VP like Kamal was. Yeah, maybe. He's smart. He'll be a great advisor. He's not an alpha. Yeah. He's not as bad as Kamala Harris, though. Alan, I promise you I will do it. I like that song.
A big jump down. Then it's
He's
Samsung.
not talking to the people. Yeah, that's a problem. He isn't talking to you and me.
There's Intel and everybody else here. So I think that it's going to require and I don't like multilateral trade agreements, but if we're going to have to do them, let's keep it bilateral. Bilateral agreements with Japan, with South Korea.
No,
That's
it's
a
as
big
bad
part
as
of what's
Kamala,
going to
no.
be required. And so my view is, let's think about first term in office as it relates to this dimension of foreign policy. End the Ukraine war on terms that help pull Russia out of China's hands. That's going to require rebuilding a lot of trust. I think I'm up for that job, and I believe that Putin can trust us to follow our self-interest as long as we trust him to follow his. Reopen economic relations with Russia, freeze the current lines of control, make a permanent commitment that NATO
Thank you so
will
much
not
for that
admit
$10
Ukraine to
super
NATO.
chat.
But in return, we
guy.
can, if not disband that Russia-China alliance, I'd get India back on side, and if there's a guy who's going to
Of course you would.
rebuild trust with India, it better be a guy with the name Vivek Ramaswamy who might be up for that task. But getting
There you
India
go.
on side
There
to say,
you
know what, we're
go.
gonna
That
be
felt
making sure that in the
good.
conflict situation
More
in
of
Taiwan,
that.
that we're at least on side with the United States.
Tried to shock the game.
But then more importantly, get semiconductor self-sufficiency in the United States, reduce our economic dependence on China. If we're there by the end of my first term, by the end of 2028, the stakes are now just a lot lower with respect to what's actually happening in Taiwan. And if, is it preferable for China to annex Taiwan even after that scenario? No, probably not. But that's a different bar for whether or not we're going to actually be willing to send our sons and daughters to die over it. And in the meantime, there's one aspect of our national defense that surprisingly nobody's talking about, Tucker, which is actually our national defense of the homeland, where we have actually badly missed the plot for super EMP attacks, cyber attacks, nuclear defense. We helped Israel build an Iron Dome. How about an equivalent of an Iron Dome for the United States and our own homeland? And so that's where I'm focused in my first term. On foreign policy, if I can get us to semiconductor independence, if I can get us to significantly reduced, if not total economic independence from China,
That is the
weaken
dream.
the Russia-China alliance by ending the war in Ukraine, that actually keeps China at bay from not having an economic gun to our head over our modern way of life, at which point we then have a different set of commitments where after that we're going to be in good shape no matter what happens. And so I wasn't planning to get into some foreign policy detour, but
Okay,
that's
thank
the way
you.
I'm thinking about the first term.
That all of that makes sense.
Yeah, it
think so?
does.
I wasn't sure. We and I haven't talked
I'm
about
not
Taiwan
sure
before.
what is controversial about any of that.
Well, I think what's
it's so
controversial about it is they say
how
it's weak.
far those priority. It's weak.
That's what I heard yesterday. Yeah, I mean, I
From
had-
whom?
Well, from a lot of Republicans actually. And
Is
so,
there a dumber group? I mean, than the foreign policy Republicans? I'm not talking about Republican voters. I mean, the members of Congress.
Finally,
the low
it's
IQ
heating up.
guys from, including your
What's up,
state, I hate to
Jesse?
say it, Texas, who make their entire career about seeming strong
Yeah.
and quoting Reagan, and under
true,
his
Wilson.
watch, the country has become demonstrably weaker.
it has become, and that's the
Doesn't
whole
lead
point.
to strength, actually. Where are we now?
And the funny part
With
is,
our transgender army? Like, seriously.
well, people also miss this, Tucker, and this makes people uncomfortable as they get very upset when I say this. I think there's a chance that if we enter war with nuclear allied Russia and China, the United States as we know it, we may take a risk of it ceasing to exist.
Of course.
Okay, I'm glad you appreciate that. That's good because many people are like, what are you talking about? The United States ceased to exist. No, I actually think,
Well, in a nuclear conflict, yes.
well, because we don't have nuclear defense capabilities.
No.
National defense has not been about defense for a very long time.
Right.
And so, by the way, super EMP capabilities take out our electric grids. We have,
Marcia, why do you think China's buying farmland? Wouldn't you if you didn't like if we had the opportunity to buy Chinese farmland, wouldn't we do that?
60 Chinese transformers that are in the midst, nodes in our own electric grid. They could shut down our modern way of life with that. You want to talk about actual cyber attack capabilities? We're better on offense. We have no defensive capabilities. And so, when I think about a modern foreign policy vision, I'd revive a modern Monroe Doctrine. You don't mess with the United States on our own soil. We are not okay with a Chinese spy balloon flying over half our country. We are not okay. We do not consent to a Chinese spy base off the southeast coast of the United States or in Cuba spying on the southeast corridor of the United States. We're not okay with intentionally pumped fentanyl, the raw materials literally coming, I'm not making this up, from Wuhan to Mexican drug cartels that are intentionally being pumped across our southern border as part of really a one-sided opium war. No, we're not okay with that, or with interference in the Western Hemisphere, or with China having control over the Panama Canal, something that
Vivek needs a haircut.
No, we're not okay with that, but that is also our top priority. Protect the homeland and the interests of citizens here at home. That is how America is strong and actually leads on the global stage. And so the irony is, at least like the Reagan version of this was, yes, all of that projection peace through strength, but strategic defense initiative, nuclear defense here at home. Now we're in the worst of all worlds, where you have a generation of people who vaguely remember the slogans and feel like they want to puff their chest but can't really do it super confidently. So they're like doing it as like a second language. Well, altogether, forgetting about the actual defense of the homeland, it's even worse because the peace through strength part, well, the strength part actually provokes that which we're not even prepared to handle back at home. And so I end up talking to a lot of neocons actually in terms of, bolstering me up, because they don't have the right strategic vision, but they know all like the names of like, what an Ohio class, SSGN versus SSBN is, and I don't know these things.
All the war porn, they love that.
I mean, I wasn't born with this knowledge, but I'm going to be U.S. president. Yeah. I better darn well and trained to know it. And so I'm probably talking to more liberal hegemony neocon people training me, not because I'm taking their views. I deeply disagree with them, but they, know the lexicon. And so, I want to put myself in a position where it's easily dismissible. This guy doesn't know what an Ohio class SSGN versus a SSBN is. Well, okay, well, now I do, it turns out. It took all of about 30 minutes to get that one under our belt. But it doesn't matter. You're missing the plot if you're actually failing to actually advance.
Is there a single neocon with a happy?
Yeah, sometimes I'm just like imagining what other countries will think of if we had Vivek as a president. I don't know. Trump had that. He's because of how like insane the left got over Trump, he had that feeling that at any moment he could just hit the nuke button. And people were like genuinely, I never thought he would do that, but people genuinely thought that. And so I don't know if he has that same, like when I say we're coming, there will be a hellfire storm like never before seen. Like he doesn't have that.
Personally,
like
imagine.
I haven't drilled into it.
Dinner at Bill Kristol's house.
Wildfire storm.
Do you know what I mean? Like it does
I don't know
seem
him,
like,
yeah.
and I don't want to psychoanalyze here, but it does seem like their project has nothing to do with helping the United States in any way, and it is psychosexual or something. They're for war as long as other people fight it. I mean, it's like a syndrome. I've never seen anything like it.
There is a certain titillation you see when they're using words like Virginia class this or Ohio class that or tomahawks facing, there's a certain type of satisfaction.
If your wife respected you probably wouldn't have to talk that way. So no, I think everything you said is self-evidently sensible, and it's hard to. By the way, if you took a poll on what you just said, your defense priorities as you just articulated, I can't imagine you get under 90% for that. Like what? How could you disagree with that?
But I haven't taken a poll. But it'll be interesting to find out.
It's so obvious.
If I'm wrong, maybe I'll get wiped out in the election, and I'm okay with that.
I want to play, and you're busy. You got to go campaign. But I just want to play one. I want to play a soundbite, a SOT, as we say, from you on the campaign trail. This is an exchange, which I think just says a lot, where you're approached by a self-described pansexual.
Oh yeah.
That's what happened next.
I was just wondering, what were your opinions on the LGBTQ community?
Well, I don't think it's one community.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, how could it be? Just mashed together an alphabet soup. Trans is fundamentally in tension with gay, if you ask me. But what's your opinion?
I am personally a pansexual, so I was just wondering what your views on same-sex couples were.
I don't have a negative view of same-sex couples, but I do have a negative view of a tyranny of the minority. So I think that in the name of protecting against a tyranny of the majority, and there are times in this country's history where we have had a tyranny of the majority, we have now, in the name of protecting against tyranny of the majority, created a new tyranny of the minority. And I think that that's wrong. I don't think that somebody who's religious should be forced to officiate a wedding that they disagree with. I don't think somebody who is a woman who's worked really hard for her achievements should be forced to compete against a biological man in a swim competition. I don't think that somebody who's a woman that respects her bodily autonomy and dignity should be forced to change clothes in a locker room with a man. That's not freedom, that's oppression. So I believe that we live in a country where free adults should be free to dress how they want, behave how they want.
This is him at his best, right here.
You don't become oppressive by foisting that on others.
Yeah.
And that especially includes kids, because kids aren't the same as adults.
Yes.
It's just
that was fantastic
in so many ways, but I
so much better than anything you said earlier.
Answer, 3 parts about it I love. She comes up and says, "What are your opinions of the LGBT community?"
Pansexual.
First, you question the premise of the question itself. How is it a community? trans is fundamentally in tension with gay, as you say. That's not a
I agree with
candy. Second, you're completely calm and you explain yourself. And third, you say, what's your opinion?
Yeah.
And you throw it back to her. But to the first thing, trans is fundamentally in tension with gay. I have not heard anybody say that in public. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's just starting with the L and the G. Most lesbians don't like gay men and vice versa. But then now you keep adding.
I don't think you can say that. It's too true.
And he's sort of like.
That might have been the gayest thing I've ever seen Tucker do. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's so true. Oh, it's like Birdo. Like, oh, God. Okay. That is true. I would rather hang out with a gay couple over a lesbian couple any day of the week.
Further start playing this out. Wait. Trans is this totally weird separate thing that's like, so like you're just like mashing this like alphabet soup just to create an us versus them destruction of modern order.
Sorry, I should say I someone in the studio is nodding who would know what you just said is true.
It's the truth. I mean, really. And so
this is nuts.
The truth is, let's just take, I mean, we could have a lot of fun with this one, but just take some of the suppositions here and see if this logically makes sense, right? Like one of the suppositions in the gay rights movement, which, you know, I'm totally open to this, but it's just partly of how we created gay rights in this country, is that the sex of the person you're attracted to is hardwired on the day you're born, even though there is no gay gene. That's the, now if you make it one
I've
movement,
seen some pretty
the
gay
LGBT
genes.
movement, that's the same movement that also now says that your own
KB
sex.
super chatted $19.99 for the Rainbow Tucker. LOL.
Thanks so much for the super chat. For the Rainbow Tucker. What if he came out and was like, "It's me, Tucker. I'm here. Everything is so great. Vivek, so great tie. Love the way you tie that knot. Show me how it's done, Vivek." So what is that thing about lesbians again? Sad. Thank you for the super chat. Gay Tucker should be a thing. I feel like that's like the quickest way to get myself canceled. I just make a Gay Tucker. Hello, it's me, Gay Tucker. I'm here with Vivek Ramaswamy, the hottest candidate to ever run for president. What's your name? Maybe that's why he had to leave Fox. No, they would celebrate him if he was gay. They would put him on the front. God, maybe that will be a thing. I'll just take every single one of his interviews and I'll just dub over. Hey, it's me, Tucker. Would you like to pet my monkey? Okay, my God. We are totally off track. I mean, it would be so easy.
It's completely fluid over the course of your life, even though there is a definitive sex chromosome. Like, you can't believe these two things at the same time. They're fundamentally
nonsensical.
It's nonsensical.
Freaking crying.
And so that's what it reveals. What's going on, Tucker, is that these are cult-like beliefs.
Okay, put in the chat. Should I make videos of stupid skit videos of Gay Tucker? That's me, Gay Tucker. What's up? What's up?
Systems, right? Because if it's a religious cult, then you don't have to, I mean, you don't have any obligation to logic if you're subscribing to a religion. And the worst religions are the ones that fail to recognize themselves as religions. I think religion can be a great thing. You and I are both pro-religion, pro-faith, if we recognize that we're actually exercising faith. But the most dangerous religions of all are those that claim to be secular but are actually religious in their conviction. And one of the ways you can smoke out that it's a religion is just these inherent tensions. Then you give it a flag, then you give it a symbology, you give it an idol. The first idol was not good enough, the rainbow flag. Then they had to make the trans flag, the upgraded version, the golden idol. They started with the silver one. And so this is what this is about, is a form of idolatry in the trans flag that is a symbol of a broader religious conviction. It's kind of the same thing you see in the climate movement, actually. Is like, I kind of enjoy this because you get to the bottom of what's going on by exposing the illogic of it. Right? Like on the climate, there's a parallel for what's going on with LGBT with climate. You think two different issues. What are you talking about? Well, the same people who are antithetical to carbon emissions here in the United States are perfectly fine with shifting those carbon emissions to China, even though it was supposedly global warming that we're addressing. Or the same people who are hostile to carbon emissions are also hostile to nuclear energy, which is the most productive form of carbon-free energy production known to man. Again, you can't believe both of those things at once unless you're subscribing to a broader religious worldview. And I think that religion is actually, it's the same religion, whether it relates to the climate dogma, whether it relates to LGBTQIA plus-ism, whether it relates to racial wokeism. It's a broader vision that defines itself in opposition to the American vision, to the American way of life, that says we are individuals who are members of these units we call families which are embedded in the substructure of this thing we call a nation, and a nation which exists under the broader blessing of God. Individual, family, nation, God. That is one worldview. And the thing we're describing here is an alternative worldview grounded in race, in gender, in sexuality, in climate. And one of the things that I feel for some of the people who subscribe to this religion, I somewhat felt for this woman, right? She wasn't, there are others like her. There's another one actually at the Iowa State Fair who had similar beliefs that did not comport him or her or they self, whatever this individual was, in the same civil manner that this woman did. He had a cowbell and was ringing and was,
gotta have more cowbell.
Was, antithetical to having conversation. This woman at least was having a conversation. I kind of felt for her because what I saw in her eyes was she's not an evil person who's trying to be a crusader for some faith to put the other side out of business. Those people exist.
It's almost done.
She was just lost, actually. Right? I don't know if it was harder to see on the camera, but
based
I was
on the love of Jesus Christ,
face to face with her. And when I see that, it's why I also thanked her. I said, thank you for being civil in your exchange, and I'll give you the same courtesy in return. I mean, she was early 20s, best my guess. She's lost. There's a void there, right? So I asked her the question back. There's a blank stare you get in a response. It's almost the same blank stare as if I ask most young people on a given day, what does it mean to be American? It's that same blank stare.
Oh my God,
that's like a deer in the headlights.
That is so true.
And I think,
oh my God, I work with a lot of kids, man. And if you were to ask these kids, what does it mean to be American? They would be almost offended by that question, to be honest. And that is like, we're killing ourselves. It's freaking insane.
This is our moment, our duty, our job as leaders. It's the job of the next U.S. president. Might be the most important one of all.
More cowbell.
To fill that void with an answer to the question of, what does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to be you? What does it mean to be an individual rather than riding a tectonic plate of group identity?
Supporting the democracy.
What does it mean to be a member of a family, a nuclear family with a mother and a father that by definition brought you into this world? What does that mean? What does it mean to be a citizen of this nation? Not some nebulous, vague global citizen fighting climate change. No, but a citizen of this nation, on this land, with these ideals.
Yeah.
What does it mean to believe in God, to be a nation under God? I think that's our moment. And I believe that if we fill that void with an actual affirmative vision, we will dilute these other poisons.
This is his final point.
They're symptoms. They're symptoms of a deeper cancer. That cancer itself is a void, a black hole.
It reminds me of like comedians I know
with
that
an actual affirmative vision
set a
of
punchline
who we really
and
are.
they just want to tell a story.
That's got to be how we win. And the thing that frustrates me most, actually, about the Republican Party, Tucker,
when he reacted to her compassion, she was disarmed.
The neoconism in our foreign policy, and I mean, it frustrates me deeply. But this feels solvable through an alternative set of policies, right? I can go do deals on a global stage, and let's hope I'll be successful if I'm in that seat. I think I will. But this is actually the deeper challenge. You can only stand up with the spine abroad or in an economy or whatever if you at least first know who you really are. And I think that is the far more difficult question. It's not going to happen through policy, but somebody. It doesn't have to be a U.S. president. It could be, it could be someone who has a media outlet. It could be a religious figure, but it could be a parent. Maybe it's not one person. Maybe, which is what I think the real answer is going to be. Maybe it's going to have to be leaders in the different spheres of our lives, each stepping up and speaking with conviction to the question of answering who we really are. And I think the U.S. president has a role to play there in answering who we are as Americans.
Sure.
And the thing that really frustrates me back about the Republican Party is, I wrote Woke Inc. a couple years ago. You were kind enough to help me launch that.
If you don't mind
with
purchasing
you, and we had a great
it.
conversation, and a lot of people read it. And then the Republican Party starts reciting memorized chapter and verses from, not just my book, but maybe others like it.
Don't apologize, Angela. That's good.
But without actually knowing what they're even talking about. They understand the word, they're uttering the words, but they don't really understand the phenomenon they're addressing.
Come on, Vivek, say it.
Which stops you from actually getting to the true solution, which is actually understanding that there's a deeper void and vacuum that we have to fill with an affirmative alternative vision of our own. That takes courage. That takes vision. That takes some level of imagination of what is actually possible. You don't have to imagine it too much. It's been true for most of our history, so you can maybe just draw from that. That's how I do it. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. Let's maybe just borrow from the people who set this thing into motion. They had a pretty good idea of what they were doing. But that's what this moment calls for. And either we rise to that occasion and we take that 1776 spring spirit and we channel it into a revival of that once more, or else we will be the Israelites lost in the desert asking to go back and be ruled by the Pharaoh. And that's exactly what this nation is otherwise on a march to actually towards being ruled by, quietly becoming a people of sheep so our government can be a government of wolves.
That's a perfect analogy. Vivek Ramaswamy, thank you very much.
Wow.
Good luck at the debate.
Thank you.
That was crazy. I mean,